Hi, this is Murielle Banackissa, and this is How I Create.
Welcome to This Is How We Create, a show that digs deeper into the creative life of contemporary artists of color. Discover what feeds their creativity and how they found or are finding their artistic voice. Through these intimate and candid conversations, you'll gain insights into the lives of creative professionals of color that are hard to find anywhere else.
Welcome back to This Is How We Create. My name is Martine Savoring, your host. If you have ever wanted a friend whose recipes and whose food and the way of cooking, and I'm quoting Sadia Badei of Pickup Limes, whose food gives you a burst and is filled with international flavor, then Murielle Banackissa is the person for you. If you flip through her latest book, Savoring, you will drool over the recipes inspired by her Congolese and Russian-Ukrainian heritage. And you know what? You might just not notice that everything in her cookbook is vegan. If you're inspired to learn more, let me tell you a little bit about Murielle. Murielle Banackissa is a food photographer, food stylist, and first-time author of the cookbook, Savoring, Meaningful Vegan Recipes from Across Oceans. She's based in Montreal, Canada, and outside of spending hours developing new recipes and shooting them in her home studio, Murielle loves getting lost in good books. She loves to journal and paint and sips on warm beverages, not necessarily while going on long walks, but she also enjoys a good long walk. Murielle draws a lot of inspiration from the colors and the textures found in nature, from water droplets to the sun shining through the leaves early in the morning and the orange glow of summer nights. Murielle, I am so pleased to welcome you to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Martine, for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here.
I found you first off through Pickup Limes because I am a reformed vegetarian. I have never quite made it to veganism, but I have been making a lot of vegan recipes actually. And so I can't wait to get your book. I've ordered it and it'll be in. And once it comes, I'm really looking forward to sending you a snapshot of me holding it.
Awesome. I can't wait to see that.
So I would love for you to start out by telling us a little bit about your childhood memories in having to do with food and perhaps also with creativity.
Yeah, so I was born in the Republic of Congo in a small town called Pointe Noire. And honestly, like when I think back of my earliest years, there was so much food and creativity infused in my days. In terms of food, one of my earliest memories of food was going to church with my family and then coming back. And then my family and their friends would have like these get-togethers where everybody would bring different dishes that they liked, and it was kind of like this big potluck. And I just love that. I love the texture. I love the colors, and food has always been like something that really draws me in. Most people really, really love food, but from a very young age, I remember like loving food. So that's the food part. And then in terms of the creativity, my parents made it kind of a point to have me be part of creative activities. So I used to take painting classes when I was in Congo, which I really, really loved. I also did a bit of ballet when I was a kid. That didn't really work out super well. I was a little too bossy. I was like bossing the other kids around, but I still really enjoyed it and I loved dancing. And actually, fun fact, one of my first photo shoots was me dressing up my Barbies and then putting them on the sofa and taking pictures of them, I'm guessing with a disposable camera. And I still have these pictures at home at my mom's place. And so it started pretty early on because we left Africa when I was 8 years old. So this happened before I was 8 years old. And then it took many years before I kind of reconnected with my passion for photography. But creativity was always a big part of my life from a really early age.
When you left Africa, did your family move directly to Montreal?
Yeah. We all came together and we've been in Montreal ever since. It's been 22 years now that we've been in Montreal. And so we've always been here since 2 decades now.
So you studied, I believe, business as well as marketing in school. Now, all throughout your schooling and in growing up, were you taking photographs at all?
Oh yeah, very much so. I was always the friend that had the camera who would bring them like to little get-togethers. I had a lot of fun just like editing pictures. In the early days, I remember like one of my first editing software that I used was Vesco. I don't know if you remember that. It was like, the app on the phone. And I used to love like playing with the filters and all that. And food too. Like I loved throughout my schooling to just try different recipes, especially on the weekends. That was always kind of like my precious time to make desserts for my family, try out new things, research the internet, look through cookbooks to cook for my family. So it's both have always been a big part of my life. And it's only later in my life that I merged kind of the two passions together. That was towards the end of my university schooling that it happened.
Can you tell me a little bit about how your love of food and becoming a vegan really spurred you on this journey to cooking and to eventually to your cookbook?
Yeah, it's honestly, it really happened organically, like many things in life. I never really thought all these two passions would bring me to where I am today and having this cookbook. But initially, because as I mentioned, I loved cooking and I used to like editing photos, and I noticed this little trend on social media where people were taking like pictures of the food and then sharing that. And I started doing that as well. At that point, I already had a DSLR camera because I just enjoyed taking photos of like family moments, things like that. And that's how the passion really ignited. And then I was offered the opportunity to shoot for a friend of mine who had this ice cream company. And I started taking pictures for his company. And that was kind of the first time I realized, oh, okay, like this is a thing. Like I can do this as like, a way to make money. And I was kind of at a crossroads where I was ending school and not really sure what the next step was. So I tried that and it took off. And then I started developing recipes for companies as well. So again, that was a job I didn't even know existed. And the first contract I got doing that, I was just like, how are they asking me to do this? Like, this is kind of crazy. And I was really worried and stressed to do it, but I accepted. And it ended up being like one of the best decisions of my life because it really trained me in creating my own recipes and not just executing recipes that I found online. And then I started sharing these recipes on my blog, taking more photos for myself as well as for clients. And at some point, I got contacted by Appetite, which is an imprint of Penguin Random House. And they said, we've seen your work. We like your pictures. We like what you have to say. And we would love for you to write a proposal for a cookbook. And that was in 2021, I think. I'm so mixed up a little bit with the dates, but I think it was 2021. And the proposal was accepted. And there I was on that journey of creating my cookbook.
Oh gosh. Okay. So I want to bring us back a little bit and then we'll get to the cookbook. So Chicago, because I live in Chicago is a big food photography town. And I remember you just saying now that you were asked to photograph ice cream. I don't think anybody understands how hard it is to photograph ice cream.
Oh, yes, it is.
It's so tough.
It's really hard. Yeah.
It's really hard. And I think looking at your YouTube, looking at your Instagram and your website, it's all really beautiful. But I don't think anybody understands just how hard it is to do what it is that you do. I'd love for us to go back a little bit and think about when you went to college, university, as you would say it probably in Canada. What were the foods that you would call back home, wanting the recipe for, wanting to learn more about how your mom cooked this or cooked that? And tell us about how you felt, if you indeed would call her, wanting those foods that really made you feel like home.
Mm-hmm. What's really interesting is that it's a really good question that you're asking, because I never really asked myself, like, what was that transition of me eating the food from my mom cooking it and me actually making the food myself? Because that, interestingly, in university and even like many years afterwards, these comfort foods were foods that I would go to my mom for her to feed us, because she always knew like the exact measurement. My mind doesn't measure anything, so I was going to say measurements, but really it's, eyeballing and just the expertise of making the same recipe over and over again. And so I would go to her to make things like, for example, my mom's borscht, which is like a classic Russian-Ukrainian soup that's made with beets and potatoes, has some cabbage. and also like the Olivier salad, which is kind of like, well, it is a potato salad, but all the vegetables in it are much smaller in terms of like the chop. There's some carrots, some peas. And so I would kind of go to her and ask her to make those dishes for me. And they were always comfort foods. Even to this day, you know, like when I make these recipes at home, I very much enjoy them. But there's something quite special about my mom making it for me because there's her special touch, like the way she cuts vegetables, the way she seasons things.
So what was the first recipe that you wrote and tested?
So the first recipe that I wrote, I believe it's a recipe I wrote for a client. I mentioned that there was a client that asked me to develop recipes and I had never done it before. And this client is Simple Mills. It's a pretty big brand now in the US especially. And they sent me their like baking mixes and they asked me to develop some recipes with them. I don't remember the first one, but it must have been like one of their pizzas. So I had to like make the pizza crust and then add like different ingredients on top and modifying them a little bit, like cooking, for example, like some vegetables to put on top. I think it was one of those. It was more on the simpler side, but it allowed me to just gain a little bit of confidence in trying to develop the recipe and also writing a recipe, which is something that is very much a skill. Like people tend to think, you know, you just eyeball ingredients and the way you write it is not very, there is very much a formula to writing recipes. Like, and I've learned this even more so with the years that I've been doing it. But in the early days, I remember looking a lot at how other bloggers and recipe writers would write their recipes and try to replicate a little bit the format.
I'm assuming it's not too secret in terms of the way that you develop your recipes and how you found that shorthand. Can you tell me a story of how when you finally figured out your shorthand to writing recipes, how did that feel? Where were you? And what was it like then to continue to develop recipes now that you had that shorthand?
So a few years ago, I remember being on YouTube. I'm a person who loves to learn through like video content. I find there's so much knowledge on YouTube. And I was on YouTube and there's a person who was walking through how she developed recipes. And she mentioned a book called The Vegetarian Flavor Bible by Karen Page. And I had never heard of it before. And she was saying how the way the book works is kind of like a dictionary. So you have most fruits and vegetables and different ingredients that are in the book. And if, let's say, you would look up beets, it would describe the flavor of beets. And then it would write under, there would be all these pairings that beets pair well with. And I ordered the book on Amazon right away when I learned about it because I thought it was really a genius idea. And then when I got it and I had to develop a recipe for a client, I went through that process. It was a client that had, it was like a blueberry company. So I looked up blueberries and then all of a sudden I have all these pairings that work really well with blueberries, that complement blueberries. And the recipe creation process became so much simpler in terms of thinking, okay, what can I add in? What's an ingredient that maybe doesn't pair as well? And ever since I've really relied on it a lot, especially when it comes to ingredients I may be less familiar with or things, you know, when sometimes I want to create a recipe that maybe has been seen before, let's say a butternut squash soup, but I want it to be a little bit unique. I want it to have a bit of a twist. I'll go into the book and look up butternut squash and then get myself inspired from that. And then obviously, like I paired that with just my experience of knowing, you know, basic recipes of like how to put a soup together, for example.
I feel like some people are listening to this and thinking, oh, this is what I needed.
I know. I felt the same way.
So tell me how you felt when all of a sudden you get this message where you were being asked to submit a proposal for a book. Tell me where you were and how did you feel when you got that message?
I was at my apartment. It was just a random, I think it was like a day of the week, like Monday or Tuesday. It was the afternoon. I remember it very well because I have such a clear memory of the light coming in. I was in the kitchen. The kitchen is very, very bright in the afternoon. And, I opened this email and I see this an email saying, oh, you can write this proposal. And honestly, the feeling was very much disbelief. You know, it's like my brain didn't compute what was written in front of me. And like immediately my brain went to like, wait, is this like a scam? Is there, like, is this real? Because as much as I always felt deep down that at some point I would write a cookbook, it was something that I almost didn't allow myself to dream of. Just because, like, at the time when it happened, like, it's not like my audience was huge compared to like other people who are recipe creators, who have hundreds of thousands of followers. So I didn't want to dream too much of that because I felt like, if it doesn't happen, I'll be disappointed. But I knew that eventually, when the time was right, it would. And it just so happened that it was then. And it was just like a wonderful feeling, incredible. And then when I learned that I could have recipes that I grew up with featured in the book, I felt ecstatic when I learned that, because I wanted the book to be very close to me and my heritage and my history, and to be able to have the opportunity to write that type of book was just, I was over the moon.
So you moved to Canada when you were 8 years old. And so with your dad being from the Congo, and your mom having a very interesting background being Russian-Ukrainian, you've moved to Canada, and now you're having all of these influences of Canadian food and the Canadian heritage as well. When you were conceptualizing your cookbook, what was the through line that you wanted to have that would be carried through the cookbook, or at least maybe it was a flavor? I'm not quite sure. I'm just really interested to hear how you thought about conceptualizing it.
So initially, my very first idea about what I wanted the through line to be for the book was childhood memories, or memories in general, memories around food. So I knew I wanted to feature recipes that had some sort of history. Either it would be like recipes that are close to my cultural background, so like my mom's heritage or my dad's heritage, or recipes that I kind of discovered along the way on my food journey, or recipes even that would be inspired by dishes I tried in Montreal, Montreal is like one of the most multicultural cities in Canada, if not the most. So that was initially the first thing. And so when I put together the proposal for my book, I really wanted that, to put that forward. And so the first, even like 50 to 60 recipes came to mind very quickly, because I have very clear recipes that for me, brings me back to memories, to moments in time, to dinners with families and friends.
I was when researching you, there was this video that I saw where you made these rolls. I forget the name of the rolls, but they were these lovely rolls where you chopped up garlic and dill.
Yes, the pampushki. Yes. Like the dinner rolls. Yes.
That looks so good.
Oh my God, it's so good.
So tell me about the influence of the pampushki.
Yes.
In your life growing up.
Interestingly, that's a recipe that kind of entered my family's like culinary heritage much later. It's not a recipe I necessarily grew up eating, but it's a recipe my mom used to eat when she was younger. And when she introduced the recipe to her family, like it just instantly became a classic. There are these like fluffy, super doughy dinner rolls. They pull apart, and they're just, when you have them right out of the oven, it's like heaven. I had some like last week, so the memory is very vivid right now in my mind. And so it's the ultimate comfort food. And it's a dish that at first it was, within just my family. And then slowly, like, we introduced them to my husband family. And now the recipes in the book, and like everyone can make them at home. So yeah, it's a dish that's like ultimate comfort.
Well, I can't wait to make it. So my next question for you, writing a book and writing a cookbook is just no small feat. So can you tell me about how long it took you from the proposal to when the book was finished, when your book baby was birthed?
Yeah, it was 4 years. Yeah, it was a really long time, but I was really, really, really lucky to work with a team that really respected the fact that it would take me some time to put the book together, to create the recipes, and also shoot them. Because a lot of times, many cookbooks, they're written by a person or a group of people, and then they're shot by a photographer. But because I did both, it took me quite a long time to put it together. And it took 4 years in the making. And of course, there's like the whole process of going through the recipes and like reviewing them, making sure it's written in the proper way, making sure it's consistent. And also, before you mentioned what was the through line for the recipes, initially it was the childhood memories. And then as I was working on the book, my editor offered for us to kind of modify it a little bit so that the childhood memories would stay, but there would be an emphasis on the idea of slow cooking and slowing down and enjoying the process of cooking. So I had to kind of start incorporating that through the book and like the head notes and stuff so that it would be maybe a little bit more universal for readers. And, Savoring, the name of the book, is a big part of my life. It's so important to take time to slow down and enjoy the process of cooking.
So I have kind of a secret to share with you. And that is, I absolutely love cooking, or at least I did. And once upon a time, I thought that was going to be my profession, that I was going to be a chef. And this was before it was sexy to be a chef. I absolutely love to cook. But having a family stripped that all away. It's like it's gone.
Yeah.
I don't enjoy it because it's more as if I am a lunch lady than someone who's really thinking about food and thinking about how it tastes and what new things we can do to it. But I'm really inspired by your cookbook and inspired to slow down. Because, you just had a baby. And so, once that happens, something changes because it makes you aware of how much you're in charge of culture building and that the traditions that you have and loving food is an important part. We all eat, but to really have the luxury to be able to eat and to be able to choose to eat really delicious foods, that's something else altogether. But in researching you and in talking with you, I'm so much more inspired to slow down and not necessarily think of food as utility. Like just think of it as, I just need to get this out. I just need to make dinner, instead of like, how can we all as a family come together to reconnect and to really savor the small and the little moments.
I love that.
In our lives.
That really speaks to me. Honestly, I can relate, although, my baby is very, very young. I already, I could put myself in the shoes of so many people. Like all of us, we have such busy lives, right? We're always kind of multitasking, doing a million things at once. And when the time comes to prepare dinner, oftentimes we don't necessarily have a really long time. And if you have kids and people, everyone's hungry, you have to kind of put something quickly together. And a big part in the book that was important to me is to give little tips and tricks, even for those like quick and easy meals, on how you can slow down and savor. For example, if you have it's like taco night, okay? And then you're sauteing your onions, and it's very easy to just be like, okay, saute quickly onto the next thing, put it all together quickly. I encourage the readers a lot to taste along the way. And when you do taste, even if it takes a few extra seconds, that process of just like pressing pause and being there and just tasting before you move on to the next step, I think it does create that sense of slowing down, even though it's not like you're taking 2 hours to create a very elaborate meal. And then on top of that, I do encourage people to, if you do have, let's say, a weekend where you have like a bit more extra time, the kids are doing something and you have maybe 2 hours, then you pick a recipe that you've been like eyeing or that you bookmark, you get the ingredients and you use that 2 hours to do it. It doesn't have to be every weeknight. It doesn't have to be even every weekend, but having like that intentionality and setting those like little pockets of intentional cooking is amazing. And, my baby is 2 months, and I just had like one of those moments last night where she was with my husband and I had like an hour to cook, and I was like, oh my God, I haven't had this in so long. And it was the best. It was so nice. And, it can't happen every day, and that's okay. But when it does happen, it's like, oh yes, I feel, nourished to be able to do that. And then I think also other people feel that. And then like with kids, you can tell them, oh, like I included this ingredient. Can you taste it? And, it's kind of becomes part of the culture too, to be aware of, the work that goes into food, the ingredients that are added, things like that.
That is all so true. That is so true. Okay. So your YouTube channel is so good. It's so good. I mean,
I need to get back on there.
Oh, well, when you do, you just had a baby. You have to, things will happen as they do. But I didn't realize that this was going to be I'm so inspired by you fest, but it's so great because I think you have this really wonderful way of being at ease in front of the camera. And I think that also comes through your photography as well as through your recipes, that there's like a little bit of unfussiness that happens. Is that a stylistic choice that you've made, or is it just like what you've let be?
I think it just happened naturally. Honestly, I think in terms of like the YouTube videos, I have watched so many YouTube videos in the past. And so along the way, I got inspired by how people do things, how people kind of edit their videos, the different setups. And, I tweaked that so that it represented me really well. And, that's kind of how it happened. And even like with my photography, same way as with video, I looked at so many other photographers and how they did things and how they set up different scenes and how they capture details. And then I practiced, and slowly but surely my own vision kind of came to life and I developed my own style. And now I'm very comfortable in just creating because I don't have to go through the thought process too much of like, how do I differentiate myself? I'm already kind of comfortable with the aesthetic I've created through the years.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, Murielle. This has been quite a lot of fun. I'm a big fan. And so you know that I'll be sending you those photos of the book.
Thank you so much, Martine. Honestly, it's been a pleasure. It's been lovely chatting with you.
So everyone, Murielle's book, Savoring Meaningful Vegan Recipes from Across Oceans, is available wherever books are sold. Maybe we'll do a giveaway of one of Murielle's books. So stay tuned. Thank you again, Murielle.
Oh, thank you, Martine. It's been lovely.
Hi there. I have a quick favor to ask you before you go. If you're loving the show, would you mind taking a quick second to leave us a 5-star review on your favorite go-to podcast app? Here's the thing. Those reviews are like magic fairy dust. They help other creatives of color discover our show and tap into their own artistic superpowers. While you're at it, why not subscribe to our Substack newsletter, Creative Matters? Creative Matters is like a weekly dose of inspiration delivered straight to your inbox. You can find the link to subscribe in the show notes. All right, that's all that I have for you today. I can't wait to see you on the next episode. Bye.